Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm Keith Couch with Rush Truck Center, Greeley, Colorado, Rocky Mountain Peterbilt's on YouTube. And we have Ryan Byers with us with Front Range Compliance and DOT University. And this is the Truck Around and Find Out podcast. So where we kind of go over things in northern Colorado and the trucking industry and even nationally.
Even nationally.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. How are you today?
You know what? I am doing really good. It's Friday. We're doing this recording, getting ready to come into the weekend. We've been having our granddaughter, little Paige, been hanging out with us for the last 2 weeks. So she informed me as I was leaving this morning that she gets one more sleep at our house and then she's going home. So I think she's a little excited to make it back to Montana.
And how old is she?
She is 4, going to be 5 here at next week. So we got her birthday.
2 weeks at that age. That's
2 weeks.
That's a big deal to be away from mom.
It is. That's the second time we had her this fall for 2 weeks, and it was really funny because the first stint that she did with this, and not fall, I meant spring. The first stint she did with this, we were like 8-9 days into it, and we could barely get her to talk to her mom, and she's like, "Nope, I don't miss her." I was like, apparently they needed a break, but this time has been the complete opposite. So yeah, she's ready to get back, but she's starting kindergarten this year, so we had to do some back to school shopping for her, some new clothes, and
that's got to be starting any day now.
For her, it starts when she gets back. So I think she gets 1 week and then her school starts. Yeah. So yeah, all day kindergarten, no half day type thing, which I think helps the parents out, in this day and age. So I don't know, daycare is so expensive these days. It's like. I thought something like $1,000 a month per kid or something.
Probably more than that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, but I thought it was expensive back when my kids were little, but it's it's even more it seems these days. But so we've been having a lot of fun with our granddaughter here in town, and that kind of thing. So, what about you? You got anything happening in the world?
Well, kind of the opposite. It's with my parents.
Yeah,
I had to go get my dad. He's 83 and he's having some memory issues and some things, so we got him with a neurologist. So I drove up to Nebraska and brought him back here and did a bunch of testing and everything. So I got an MRI yesterday and kind of don't know much yet, but we'll be should be getting some answers here shortly. No. So this whole aging deal really sucks.
It does. And I kind of had that realization yesterday. I was up in Wyoming, and I was like, holy cap, I'm getting old. I was meeting with one of my buddies and started thinking about when my parents were in their early 50s, and I thought they were really ancient at that time, I'm sure, because I was young. And now I'm like, holy crap, I'm the ancient one, The last 30 years went way too fast, and I'm like 50 to 80, another 30 years. I'm like, whew, it's moving quick. So, well, prayers for your dad, and we'll keep him in our thoughts, keep him in our prayers. Hopefully, everything gets worked out on that. That's for sure.
I hope so.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's Brake Safety Week coming up, okay? The Brake Safety Week is August 23rd through the 29th. Mm-hmm. So what do you know about Brake Safety Week, Keith?
Not much.
Not much? Okay,
no, that's kind of out of my realm of things. I sell disc brakes.
You do. You sell service plans, that kind of thing. Yeah. Brake Safety Week is kind of this thing that happens once a year. CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, they get together and they always have these predetermined events every year. So sometimes they do stuff for passenger carriers where they'll do like strike forces and they'll go focus on just motor coaches and things like that. They always do something, cargo securement. They always have a Operation Safe Driver where they go out and focus on drivers. They usually have a few different events. Some of them are announced, some of them are secret, and it's just all of a sudden you just see a saturation of enforcement officers doing DOT programs and things like that. So we do have, this is one of the announced programs. It's, Operation Air Brake. And they're going to do a whole week between August 23rd and the 29th. And this is a topic that I find very near and dear to my heart when it comes to the brake safety and things like that, because we work with so many clients on their maintenance programs, just trying to get them lined out and things like that. And I see the same recurring theme over and over and over again, and that's just the lack of brake safety. It's a driver complains that they've got something, and it's maybe an old school driver, and he climbs underneath it and does a brake adjustment, or he takes it to the shop and reports, hey, my brakes aren't working, and 10 minutes later the vehicle is on the road because the shop did a brake adjustment and everything else. And so I find it absolutely kind of appalling that this industry and the feds and CVSA just have not really contributed a lot to helping the industry understand the proper service and needs for these regulations. Like, we just keep writing them up. We still see brake crashes, happen, due to brake fade and things like that. But there's really just not a lot of true blue information of how to maintenance and maintain these brakes. There's a few rules that are addressed, and if you go to like a Bendix school, you could get the proper training. Here in Colorado at CMCA, they offer an air brake for drum brakes, and they also have a disc brake class, which is phenomenal, and not as many problems with the air brakes that we see, like adjustment wise with the disc. But as you know, where we're at, many of the trailers and those trailer fleets, many of the tractors, the older trucks, the newer stuff's coming out with a lot of disc brakes, but we're not seeing, the disc brakes on some of that older equipment and things like that. We're still seeing those drums, and it just doesn't seem like the industry knows a whole lot about it. So I just kind of want to spend some time this morning to kind of bring this up, and just to kind of make my point, Keith. I went through and I gave you a copy of this, printed you up some details. I went to the federal website. It's called A&I Online, and you can pull up some really great statistics. You can search your area, you can fine tune it, you can search for specific data, and this is all kind of going through and surrounding. I did all violations. I didn't focus just on maintenance. I just said, hey, and all the violations that are written up, and I pulled up 2 reports, one for Colorado, since that's where we're at and we deal with predominantly, but also nationally. Our audience is national. I know here at Front Range Compliance Services, we kind of work nationally with companies, but I just kind of wanted to see kind of when we look at brake violations, where are we at? Now, one of the things that I found really alarming, Keith, is I went through on the national report, it was 126 pages. It's absolutely alarming. So the numbers, what I've discovered is the numbers are skewed when we talk about, these specific regulatory sites. So, because all I printed up for us today is just the top 20 violations. But when you actually do a hand counter, you go down through that, what happens is many states use their own codes to cite violations, so it gets entered into the system, and the data then is skewed within the federal number.
They're not
so
all reporting it the same.
They're not all.
Okay.
Everybody's got a different coding system. Sometimes it's a letter. Sometimes it doesn't use the regulation number. It uses something else. It's kind of crazy. And 126 pages. I know one year, it's been a couple years ago, I did an actual hand search on this, and I had like every highlighter of every color under the rainbow, and I was like, okay, brakes is this, and I went through and I did it by hand because I couldn't get the data to sort based because the wordings and everything else, they're not all universal. So I had to do it by hand and do the hand count, and I had the true tally up. I didn't do that to prepare for this. I don't really ever want to have to do that again. It was kind of a nightmare.
I think you need a hobby.
This is my hobby. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I would not have done that.
yeah. Well, I really wanted to know, and I was getting ready to give a presentation on some stuff, and I wanted to have the true blue data.
Sure.
And like I said, I kind of took that with me to kind of show you, and I gave some examples of the different coding. And it was something like, I think I discovered. I remember with one singular violation, I discovered that it was written like 94 different ways. And another one I think I discovered was in the 100 in some different ways. It was like, it's just impossible to track the data. And I was like, well, you'd think the feds, who's gathering all this, and it's their program, would say, hey, wait a minute, let's consolidate, let's do this correctly. But yeah, they don't. So anyways, that being aside. Okay, so interesting facts. We come into this Colorado report, we see the top 20 violations. We do have brakes written in there. Now, I did find it interesting. If you look at the national report and you look at the Colorado report, the number one violation is
brakes.
Nope. Nope.
No?
No, it's periodic inspection. Operating without periodic inspection. 396.17. Now,
Mine's not highlighted.
you're like, I set you up for that. That was my bad. Yeah, and the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because that periodic inspection, we talk about 396.17, that is a very important inspection. When I teach the classes for periodic inspector qualification, I remind those technicians that, when they're doing that periodic inspection, that's probably the next greatest inspection that truck, that trailer is going to go through from the day after it leaves the dealership, right? Because when it's at your shop, you guys aren't using them hard, that kind of thing. They're pretty much set. They're good. They're legal. Everything is right on them. Again, if you're a reputable dealer, right? That kind of thing. And then it goes out into the field and it lands and it's now at its place where it's probably going to sit for the rest of its life or at its first home, and it now comes to that preventative maintenance program that's going to keep that truck up and running. As you know, with maintenance, I think you've seen this a lot, that companies can go and let that thing snowball, and then it turns into a major deal. But as a part of that inspection, they have to do a brake inspection, service brakes. And in 396 Appendix A, Section 1, that whole section, which is the longest section of the entire periodic inspection standards, is all about the brake inspection. So, definitely a big part. When I teach, when I'm working with techs and I'm working with clients on their maintenance programs, I remind them of some of the best maintenance programs that I see out there. Do not just do that periodic inspection once annually. So one of the things I was introduced to by a gentleman at a company up in Weld County, they're out of Greeley. I don't want to name them, not without their permission. But his philosophy was, if I've got a truck and I've got a trailer on my shop floor, before I release it, I'm going to go through and my techs are going to re-inspect it and make sure that anything is good. And he takes it as far as when it's on their shop floor, if it has been since last quarter, they'll renew that annual inspection.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And how this came to me was I was contacted by an organization, I think it was the ATA, and this particular organization had improved their roadside inspection numbers tremendously. And it was such a drastic improvement that they wanted to hire an independent third party, non-biased, to go in and assess and look at it. So that was my first interaction with this company. I called them up, said, hey, this organization has asked me to come in, look at your numbers, look at your maintenance program, and they welcomed me with open arms. And I went in and I sat down, and I love it when I get to go to a company and learn. Because I deal with a lot of turds in this world. It's the nature of the business. We and I appreciate all the clients that come in. We like to work with them. Some are easier to work with than others. And you can always tell when we get that phone call, they just want us to put a Band-Aid on their operation and get them to go. So when I get a chance to actually sit down with a reputable group and see kind of what they're doing to impact safety, it's always really refreshing. And I'll never forget that moment that I got to see this maintenance program and hear this gentleman's philosophy. And his philosophy was, the goal is no violations. So the best inspection we can do is that periodic inspection. Where you can always go further than the minimum requirements, but you have to get those right. And brake inspections is a big one. So anyways, that's the number one inspection. You want to get on top of your brakes, new annuals, do them frequently, but get your people trained, okay, to do an annual inspection. Unless you come from one of the 20 states that have a state certification program or a state inspection program, the two closest to us in Colorado, I should say the three closest, would be Texas, Utah, and California. Then from there it goes to Louisiana, and then the rest are all kind of up and down that East Coast. So they have a state certification or a state inspector program. Colorado doesn't participate, and neither do many of the other states. So you've got to make sure your people are qualified. Just to do an annual inspection, you just basically have to fill out a qualification document just like this. Yep. And unfortunately, that is nothing more than just a piece of paper. Yeah. Anybody can check the boxes, but you got to be able to speak to that. So do your periodic inspections. Okay, let me get off that soapbox. Now, talking about the brake violations. In the top 20, Number 5 came in. Keith, we've got the brake adjustment. Okay, brake out of adjustment right in there. So that means when they went through the inspection, inspector yelled brake or blew their whistle. Okay, you hit the brakes, and at that point, it's going to, they're going to measure those. Okay, the second, or I guess it'll be the second brake violation. It came in as number 6 here in Colorado. We've got an ABS situation. So I'll talk a little bit about that when we kind of come back. You've got number 7, which would be the third brake violation. That is going to come into brake hose and tubing damaged or not secure. So we've got some chafing going on there. Okay, and it was funny, chafing. We used to always joke that's a port of entry felony, because it doesn't matter where you're at in the nation. They can look at your truck, your make and model, and I think they've got a little secret journal, and they're like right there, and yeah, there's the chafe. So yeah, find your chafes, get your lines protected. Okay, we get to the next page on this. Okay, the next violation that we came across, which would have been in the top 10, and that's going to be an audible air leak. So chafing came in as the previous one, and now we actually have a leaking air line. And then number 16 was the slack adjusters, brakes with CMVs with slack adjusters. That's one of those things that when they put something out of service, they cite the slack adjuster, ensuring that they have to make sure that the slack adjuster is ratcheting back in as part of that overall repair. So that's going to be that for national. Now, I would like to also make note that when we get in specifically, in that top 10, we talk about equipment violations. Since I did all violations here, I don't want people to be misled and think, oh, well, we didn't have a brake violation until number 5. No, technically it's number 2 because I did all other violations. All of the violations after that periodic annual inspection, those are all hours of service violations, or in Colorado, point number 4 was chain loss. So, which is an important reminder. We are coming into September.
Yep.
We're about ready to have chain loss. So we'll probably do a chain episode here coming up. But so we've got that one. National is just not much different, but just a little. We still have the first violation was break out of adjustments, okay, and then in the top 10, that was the only one, again, for all violations. So we do have some other equipment violations that popped in up there, but we also had some medical cards and hours of service. On the number 11 nationwide is a defective brake, 20% criteria, so that would be a break out of adjustment. Number 16 was brake damage, brake line damage, again, chafing. And then the last one for the 20, number 20 in the top 20 violations, we had automatic slack adjusters. So with that, I'd like to talk about just a couple of these points, and feel free to jump on in here. So we have got, first off, for brakes, when we talk about out of adjustment, for years this is the battle I've been fighting. Have you heard the term dynamiting the brakes? Have you ever heard about that? So dynamiting the brakes is a phenomenon that happens when you press the brake pedal and you get extra travel in your slack adjuster because there's movement and there's wear within the brake. And I hear a lot of shop hands, a lot of technicians that will argue that the DOT creates brake violations by telling the driver to mash on the brakes too hard. And seriously, that's the state. They say when you do your brake measurements, when the enforcement's doing the brakes, you only want to feather, or when you're doing your brake checks, you only want to feather about 45 pounds of pressure on your brake system to measure what that slack adjuster is. And I was like, wait, what? I mean, it doesn't make sense. The whole premise of the argument is wrong from the number one. Like, let me throw a scenario at you. Question is, when are you going to hit the brakes the hardest? Okay, when the inspector blows the whistle or yells brake, okay, or when the kid comes running out in front of you.
When the kid comes running
right, the emergency situation. You had the answer before I even posed the rest of the question, right?
Panic,
yeah. I mean, we're talking superhuman strength. You're probably going to hit that brake pedal so hard you could potentially bend your slack adjusters type thing, okay? The second part, the whole premise of their argument is saying, hey, they manufacture these trucks so poorly that if you press that brake pedal too hard, you're going to break your brakes. I mean, that's if you think about the premise of their argument.
I've never seen that.
I've seen some brakes blow up, but it's never due to the manufacturer standards of the truck. We all understand dynamiting the brakes does not happen when you press the brake. The brakes are required to be fully applied for a brake inspection. That's the only way you can tell if things are good. Dynamiting the brakes is the phenomenon that happens when there's too much brake wear, right? So when you look at that drum and you put your finger on the inside of it and you rub your finger, you're checking for contaminants. What does the surface feel like? Is it sandy? Is it gritty? That kind of thing. Is there any oil? Grooved? Yep. Feels like a washboard. Or my favorite, you get to the very edge and it feels like it's got a big lip and a carry handle. I mean, is that how they come from the manufacturer?
No, they do not.
No, they're pretty thick, right?
Yeah.
But do you know how much wear that you can have in there? What is the lip? When you see those grooves or you see that lip, do you know how deep it can be before it's done?
No.
It's 1/16 of an inch.
Are you serious? That's it?
A 1/16 of an inch.
Oh, I've seen way worse than that.
Oh, yeah, I've seen. Me too. Well, dynamiting the brakes happens when you hit the brakes, you put maximum pressure to it, and the drum changes shape. It goes from round to a little bit of an oval. And you can't necessarily see it with the naked eye, right? Because it's just a sweet little bitty tweak and hard to see underneath that and in that wheel set. But it's when it deforms, it shapes, it misshapes due to that brake pressure. And that slack adjuster, it does not account for wear in a brake system. So when somebody has wear in a brake, whether it be an S-cam or a bushing, that slack adjuster could move up to 1.5 inches of extra movement depending on the quality of the parts and components that are inside that brake. So I've been telling everybody the slack adjuster's a communication tool. Okay, it tells you when it's time. So I'd like to go over a rule here with you. And this comes out of Appendix A. This is 396 Appendix A. There are 4 points in there. I really just want to talk about point number 4, but I'll give you the first 3 just real quick. So point number 1 under automatic slack adjuster says fair to maintain the brake within the stroke limit. Okay, so I just want to speak on that real quick because every brake has a stroke limit. So your most common type of chambered brakes that we're going to see are going to be 20s, 24s, and 30s that we're going to see on today's fleets. 24s typically on steers and 30s on all of their axles. If it's a heavier truck, you might see a type 36, something like that. So for a standard brake, not a long stroke, a standard brake, if I said, hey, it's a 20 or 24, the maximum push rod travel for federal regulation is 1 3/4 inches. If it's a type 30, it's 2 inches. So on those brakes, what that rule just says, it fails to maintain it within. So you're doing the inspection, you got a type 30 brake, and it could be at 2 inches, it can't be over 2 inches. Okay, well, that's still a pass. So one of the things that I teach with this is for the technicians is to always keep a preventative mindset. You've got to think when you're doing the inspection, you're doing it on a cold brake. So once everything heats up, things tend to expand. So part of that inspection is making sure that slack adjuster, it's ratcheting in, right? Maximum braking efficiency is when that slack adjuster is 90 degrees from the face of that drum. So when it starts braking that plane and going over, preventative mindset needs to come in and you need to make sure why is it not ratcheting back in, that type of thing. So pay attention. Like I said, yeah, you do have that. It can't go over, but if it's not resetting back to that 0 point, we need to be wondering what's going on. Point number 2 says any automatic adjusters been replaced with a manual. Have you ever seen that one?
No.
Somebody took the autos off and put manuals on.
Yeah, I've never seen that.
Well, automatic slack adjusters came together in 1994, so 30 some years ago. So it's been 30 years, and here we are in 2026. We're still talking about it because the industry hasn't figured it out, which is why I kind of expressed my frustration with it. It used to be like from 94, and I would say until probably about 2010. You would still stumble across that because nobody liked the automatic slack adjusters. It's still a lot of old equipment. And the deeper you get into the heartland, you're still going to run into some trailers, some things like that. And even with some of the fleet exchange, you're going to run into trailers that are manufactured before 1994, and you have to do a manual adjustment. But the old ones, new guys or the people getting these newer vehicles, they come across these automatic slack adjusters. They didn't like them, so they're pull those autos off. They're junk. They're always breaking. Well, it's actually the brake system that's typically breaking. Okay, so we've got that one. Point number 3, this is damaged, loose, or missing components. Can't have can't have loose components in a brake system because you need it all to stay put and function, right? So when you hit the brakes, if your things are moving around, obviously they're not going to work. Okay, point number 4 is the big one I'm trying to get to here. Okay, with that, any brake found to be out of adjustment. Now, I always tell them, think about the wording on this. Any brake that is found to not be automatically adjusting, so it's not over the adjustment. I want them to think of that preventative mindset. Look, I know on a Type 30 you got 2 inches, but I don't really want a driver operating a truck at 2 inches because he's right at the cusp. He's good. That brake warms up. He's going to be over, and then he's dealing with a bad brake. So we want that to have some reset when, in that area. So any brake that's found out of adjustment upon the initial inspection must be evaluated to determine why the automatic brake adjuster must be corrected in order for the vehicle to pass the inspection. So it doesn't just say just jump in and adjust it. It says why. We got to know the whys. So again, make sure you're getting your tech some brake training and some Operation Air Brakes coming on. Get out and do some good brake inspections. So you got to figure out why that slack adjuster is not adjusting. So that could be a bad slack adjuster. Of course, that could be an issue. Typically, they got to be maintenance, cleaned, greased, that kind of thing. But what a lot of people fail to realize is it's also communicating with you as that brake wears.
Right.
It tends to have it doesn't reset as far. So you can gauge, hey, when am I due for a brake service? That kind of thing. Okay. Second sentence is in there, which I love. You should highlight and underline this, frame it, and put it up in your shop. It says, it is not acceptable to manually adjust an automatic slack adjuster without first correcting the underlying problem. So it's just right there, codified in rule. You only do an adjustment on an automatic slack adjuster to set it, okay, for maintenance, that type of thing. But we do not, when it comes in, you got brake problems, you have got to stop the adjustment. Just that's the whole point I want to make with this. So it is not acceptable to manually adjust your brake adjuster. Okay, and it says, for example, that it's not functioning because there may be other components within the braking system that are distressed out of specification, such as broken welds, loose mounting hardware, cracked brake drums, worn bushings, etc. So that all kind of comes from that regulation. Yeah. So Operation Safe Driver or Operation Brake Week, we want to make sure that, we're ending the adjustment, start fixing those brakes, that type of thing. So that's kind of my whole point and what I wanted to get into with that. So anyways, all right. So for YouTube, we put together a 2026 Operation Safe Driver at the DOT University on YouTube. Luke says that video went live yesterday, which would have been Thursday, the 13th. So we do have that up and available now. You can go there, watch that. They're free videos just talking about some brakes and some stuff like that. And then we are releasing an air brake class at dotuniversity.org. That should be up next week. It's not, that one is, yes, inspired by Brake Safety Week, but it's more inspired by the fact that, gosh, we keep dealing with these brake problems. And
one thing I will mention, and this is true for any Rush Truck Center nationwide, whether it's an international or Peterbilt dealer, if you get a hold of the service manager, they'll do a free brake class for your shop and your techs, or you can send them to our shop and they'll do it for free. And any other dealer group, I'm sure, any other Peterbilt, Freightliner, whatever, if you just talk to the service manager, whoever you do your service with the most, just talk to them. I'm sure they'll do a completely free. We do air conditioning classes, we do brake classes, we do all kinds of stuff like that, and we do it for free. So
absolutely,
So just get a hold of them. It doesn't have to be a Rush Truck Center. Any of the dealer groups, I'm sure they will all do them for free.
Yeah, I think that's great information. And while you were saying that, you reminded me of one more point. I got to jump back on my soapbox just for a minute because we were talking about dynamiting the brakes, right? So
he is a state trooper at heart, isn't he?
I'm very passionate about this stuff. I try to spread the word and that kind of thing, just because it's so important. But I do have to make just one more point in Appendix A because we mentioned dynamiting the brakes, and it says, hey, you should only feather so much pressure because DOT creates violations. Okay, well, I want to prove this point because it is written in law. I don't want anybody to watch this podcast and be like, well, he didn't address this. I'm putting it out there. It is written in law. When you get into the readjustment limits, okay, it says the maximum push stroke must not be greater than the values given in the tables, okay, that are in Appendix A or in 393.47. It says any brake stroke exceeding the readjustment limit will be rejected. Again, I remind you, preventative mindset. If it's close to that, get a brake service on it. It's telling you it's time for service. And then this is the important statement. It says, stroke must be measured with the engine off, the reservoir pressure between 80 and 90. Correction, CVSA corrected that. They just never update it. It's 90 to 100 with the brakes, and underline that, fully applied. So that whole thing where certain techs will argue that you should only do your brake checks, with 45, 50 pounds of pressure. No, brakes fully applied. So, yeah. Anyways, I just had to get that in there.
What if you have disc brakes?
Well, disc brakes, there are some old disc brakes that had an exposed push rod, but in today's disc brakes, that is all it's all encapsulated. So with that disc brake, you're really just checking how thick are your pads, your linings,
Right.
What does the rotor look like, contaminants, even wear right and left side, are any of the ribs through the middle, do you see any cracks in any of those things? And it should be that nice, smooth brake surface, right? If you feel the contaminants
So they're a lot easier to check.
Way easier. And they function better, right?
And
more
most of the
efficiency.
guys tell me that 90% of the time that they go through an inspection, they'll see disc brakes and you're good.
Yeah. Well,
At least the brake part's good.
Yeah, because really all you're checking is making sure the brakes are engaging. If you don't see any contaminants on the braking
And
surface.
they're much more visible, much easier.
They are. Yeah. So
And better stopping power.
a lot better.
And I know that there's been some, and I'm sure you've heard of them, some crashes and things like that where they've actually dragged the truck sales guy into court saying, why didn't you sell them every possible safety measure you could have had? Which number one on that list is disc brakes. And, now it's pretty rare that we do drum brakes anymore.
Yeah.
90% of what we sell is disc. I mean, we still got some water trucks and some vocational trucks that they still require or spec drum brakes, but
Yeah.
this is taking over the market.
It is. And it's a much better brake. I mean, the efficiency, they cool faster, so you're going to have higher control over that in heavy traffic or mountain conditions, things like that. You still have to, of course, have safe brake history or safe brake operations for the mountains and things like that. But yeah, disc brakes overall, phenomenal brake system, much, much better. But we've got years before we're done with these drum brakes because again, trailer exchange, a lot of trailers are still being manufactured with regular drum brakes.
Less money.
It is. It is less money, more maintenance. So, the other thing that I would stress when it comes to brakes is your maintenance program. How often are you truly doing a brake inspection? How often are you really looking at it? In a scenario I would use it if you were a trucking company that's based in Golden, Colorado, and you had 10 trucks, and 5 of those trucks go to Grand Junction every day, and 5 of those trucks go to Sterling every day. Okay, those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, one of those is severe mountain passes with extreme grades and conditions. The other one is all flatland. You're going to have 2 different maintenance programs because those trucks going to Sterling, they're not going to burn through brakes nearly as fast
Totally different.
as those trucks that are going back and forth to Grand Junction. So you have got to find the sweet spot for your maintenance program. And I would say that I define a maintenance program a lot like a game of golf. I know you've swung that golf club a lot, right? When you hit the sweet spot on that golf club, doesn't it feel so good?
Oh, yeah.
The ball flies, it soars, you get this little endorphin rush.
Yeah, you actually feel like a golfer.
Yeah, I feel like, hey, I can do this, right? And then you whack away at it, okay? And how many times you whack away at it and you hit that ball right on the top of it and drive it in the ground a few feet in front of you. And, if you're playing Texas rules, then you know what happens next. But, from there, maintenance programs are a lot like that game of golf. You got to find that sweet spot. a lot of people will come in and hack away and just whack at it, and just drive it right into the ground. Yeah. So that's what you want to avoid. So, Keith, that's what I've got today. Oh, I think you did tell me you might have a new video coming up on, or is up on Rocky Mountain Peterbilts.
Just threw it up last night. It's not one of the trucks I ordered, but a beautiful truck. It's a new 567 with a stand-up sleeper, pusher axle, 303-inch wheelbase. So it's a long bugger.
Long, huh?
Nothing fancy. I didn't even do polished tanks, didn't do the polished stainless steel cover over the DEF tank or anything like that, but really a nice looking truck.
Just a truck driver's truck. Gonna go out and work with
it. And the 567s, the more I'm around, the more I like them, because they're still a square. It's a slope nose, but it's still a square nose. So
gotcha.
And if you spec those out to a 589, same specs, 567's about 10 grand minimum, cheaper.
Wow.
So
wild. Got to get the trucks. Anything up? We did talk about the emissions stuff, because I needed some clarification on some of that about the whole thing that's coming on with emissions. I would just recommend, if you do have questions, things about that new engine, reach out to Keith. He is a very great resource on that stuff, and he'd be happy to sell you a truck. But the one thing I know about you, Keith, is you work with people and provide good service and information. So reach out if you do got some questions to that. But man, that's about all I've got for today. I mean, let's be honest, I could go on for the next 2 hours just talking about brakes, but I have a feeling that Keith would probably kick me under the table like, I got a meeting to get to. So anyways, all right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you listening to us, and for Truck Around and Find Out. Appreciate everything you do to keep us all moving forward and keeping that freight moving down the highway. Keep our shiny side up, and hopefully we'll catch you on one of the next episodes.
Hey, God bless you guys.